Okay, it's 6:30. We'll begin the meeting. Committee of the Whole for Leads in the Thousand Islands. Time of business is 6:30. Number 2 on the agenda is declaration of interest and general nature thereof. Does anybody have a, oh, I've got feedback from somebody. Is everybody off? Okay, we're good. Any declaration of interest or general nature thereof? If so, please declare it. And Mr. Grell, we have you remotely. No interest. Okay, so we'll move forward with the adoption of the agenda, and the motion comes forward from Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. Before I call the question on that, I ask a request to move items 6.6 and 6.7 up to the beginning of our agenda to allow us to release the good people who are here attending to go forward with their lives after the discussion. So we have Councillor Maybe who's willing to move the amendment, and Councillor Olkey is willing to second. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the amendment, which is to move 6.6 and 6.7 to the beginning of our agenda. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? And we're carried. So the motion now reads in its entirety, moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Jameson, the agenda to be adopted as circulated and now amended to 6.6, 6.7 to the beginning of the agenda. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and we're carried. Okay, so we'll move forward with item number 6.6. And sorry, I'll entertain a question from Councillor Maybe. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Just before we get started, because of the upcoming election, just wanted clarification on the lame duck council ruling. Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through your worship. So for clarification, council is not a lame duck. This is because more than 3/4 of the current members of council are seeking re-election.
So we have the authority to continue to move forward the business of the township. Okay, thank you for that clarification, and thank you for the question, Councillor Maybe. Okay, so we'll move forward with 6.6 on our agenda. Planning report SR-112-22, request for use of Days Road unopened road allowance. And the motion comes forward from Councillor Jameson and seconded by Councillor Fody, that committee of the whole recommends that council deny the request for the use of the unopened portion of the Days Road allowance that connects to the waterfront for use and improvement of a boathouse for the property at 201 Days Road, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council direct staff to proceed with removal of the existing boathouse that has been determined to be in an unsafe condition and is located on the unopened portion of the Days Road Township Road Allowance, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council direct staff that the unopened portion of Days Road Allowance, which extends to and terminates at the St. Lawrence River waterfront, be restored to a safe condition and left in a natural state to contribute to environmental protection in accordance with the policies of the official plan, and that the cost for the removal of the structure and any associated fencing and signage be funded from the 2022 operating budget. Discussion on this motion. Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Worship, and through you. I was just wondering if Marina could give us a little bit more background on this particular item to make sure that the questions that I may have here, and maybe could answer already before. Thank you.
Okay. So Director Venditti is at the podium. Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. So this report's coming forward because we've received a request from Mr. Heller, who is one of the abutting landowners, to improve the boathouse that's located on the extension of Days Road. The boathouse is in a poor state of condition right now. Actually, if I can just share my screen. So the boathouse is located at where Days Road terminates at the water, and you can see this location. And this is the boathouse. The boathouse is in a poor state of repair. We did receive some concerns about it, and the building inspector went out and took a look. Based on the condition of the boathouse, it's been determined that it is in an unsafe condition. There's some of the photos. So what we were able to find in the township records was that, I believe, here's the resolution. In 1988, there was a resolution to allow Nina Hampton to repair and extend an existing boathouse in this location. The resolution states that it's at the extension of Days Road. This is subject to the future removal of the boathouse if it's on or in the actual municipal road allowance, and if council deems the removal necessary. We have policies in our official plan that speak to maintaining all road allowances that lead to water, preserving them for environmental reasons, or for future access if it's deemed appropriate. Based on our review of it in this location, it is a constrained width. It's a small allowance. It terminates with a private laneway that goes down to a number of properties along Dark Island Lane. There's also a commercial operation at the end of Dark Island Lane. So based on planning, operations, and emergency services review, it was determined that this isn't an appropriate location to open up to public access. If you recall, there was a delegation to council, I believe at the June meeting, from Mr. and Mrs. Branscombe requesting that it be opened for public access. Given the constrained location between two private properties at the termination of the road, it's not the recommendation of staff to support that. And so the recommendation before you this evening is that the boathouse be removed. Being that it's on our property, it would be the township's responsibility to remove it, restore the site to a safe condition, and install a guardrail at the end of the flat area where the driveways lead to the private properties in that location.
Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Worship. And some questions to Director Venditti. The boathouse, as you said, is on township property, but we didn't put it there. So the cost of taking it down is burdened by the township, not the people who put it up. Number one question.
That's correct. The original agreement is with Nina Hampton, who is no longer a landowner in the area. That information is based on the resolution that we found in our records. So it's on our property. It's in an unsafe condition. So it's the township's responsibility to restore the site.
Okay, thank you. And with the removal of this particular building, some of the vegetation will be taken down and they'll have to transition to that area to remove it. Will there be a walkway left in place for the local residents who actually want to use that little space?
No, there will not be. So based on our review at this point in time, and I can't say that for certain, but based on the review at this point in time, and the state of the boathouse, it's the opinion of the building officials that it probably needs to be demolished from the water side and taken out by barge. With respect to the slope that goes down to that area, it's not a stable slope. It's not a cleared slope. And so to open it up for anybody, if you're going to open it up to public access, it's public access. So you can't limit it to local people. And given the grade of the slope, it wouldn't meet any accessibility requirements. And if the township, from a planning SEPTED, which is environmental design, crime prevention through environmental design, if we put a walkway in, we're directing people there. And if anybody gets hurt on that, we've created an access point that we're responsible and liable for.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments in regards to the motion that's on the floor? I might ask Mr. Heller to come to the podium. He had some questions that he identified before the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good luck to all of you getting reelected that are running again. So I have a couple of questions. So first of all, it's the boathouse I've been looking after it since I bought the property at 201 Days Road, which I think is something like 2006 or something like that. It wasn't in particularly great shape, but it was made much worse in the flooding of 2019. So, and you'll recall that since then it's been a little difficult to get staff or more construction in to fix it. So I have said, and in my letter to I think I copied all of you, I'd be prepared to restore it and fix it up and put it in a good state of repair. However, having said that, if your decision is to remove it, that's okay. That's clearly up to you. And my neighbor on the other side of that property is here as well. Our concern is around public access. And, and it's very narrow. It's only 40-foot right away. So it's a very narrow space. And it actually, where the boathouse is, isn't a beach. It's rocky and so on. The beaches are on each side, which are on private property. So I guess one question would be, the proposal is to put fencing and signage up. I'd be interested to know what the fencing and signage would be.
Right. We're just noting your questions in entirety. And then once you're done all your questions, we'll call them to the
Okay.
podium
Okay.
for
All right.
to answer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, so, and it's really linked to public access. Our concern is that because it's narrow, we as adjacent property owners would have difficulty with trespassing and also with liability. So, if restoring to a natural state means it stays or it's put back and with trees and so on, basically as it is now, down to the boathouse, I think, we, the two neighbors, would be perfectly happy with outcome. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is that something you want operations to, because they deal with facilities and infrastructure? What the expectation would be?
Thank you, through your worship. Our intention would be to put up steel beam guide rail to block the access off, and then the signage to say no access.
No access. Okay. That's clear, Mr. Heller. We're good. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments in regards to this motion? Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a comment. When Mr. Branscombe and family brought this idea forward, it seemed like a small gem to achieve. But unfortunately, when working with the operations and planning department, this idea, I guess, failed in way too many aspects of what it required. And parking to me is the number one aspect. I mean, it's a narrow road to start with. And if as the director of planning had indicated, if we're so-called directing the public to use that waterway, we're just asking for more trouble. So, and with regards to Mr. Heller's comments on the boathouse, my own personal belief is that of the planning department. I guess in that if it's sitting on township property, it likely should never have been allowed in the first place, but that's just my own personal opinion. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions in regards to the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, I just wonder, the two adjacent property holders, have you been bothered by people hanging out there? Is it an invitation to trespass as it is?
Do either one of the property owners want to speak to that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'm just wondering if this small strip of land between your two properties, as it is now, or even if we put up a barrier, is it an invitation to trespass, people knowing it's there? Have you had problems with it becoming a hangout sort of thing?
No, because if you go and look at it, it's very difficult to get down to from the township right away. It's very steep. It's very treacherous to get down. So short answer is no, we haven't. It's been not a problem. And I think if it's restored back, with some barrier and restored back or continued to be in its natural state as it is down to the boathouse, it shouldn't be a problem going forward.
So then you would say that the measures that we propose would be adequate?
Absolutely. Yes, they would. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much for attending, residents who had interest, and we appreciate your input at this time. So we'll move forward with item number 6.7, which is planning report SR-118-22- file number Z 2019-005, application for zoning bylaw amendment 51-55 Front Street, Rockport, Huck's Marina. And the motion comes forward from Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Olkey, that the committee of the whole recommends that council that one, the application for a zoning bylaw amendment file number Z-2019-005 submitted by Huck's Marina for the property municipally known as 51, 53, and 55 Front Street be approved, and that number two, bylaw number 07-079, zoning bylaw of the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands as amended be further amended as per Exhibit 1 draft bylaw and schedules A and B to amend zoning bylaw number 07-079 to report number SR-118-22, and that the amending bylaw be presented to council for all 3 readings. Okay, motion is on the floor. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I had only a few questions about the application that were answered by the planning department last week. One of which was the fact of the height and the capability of our fire department to meet that, because I know when we did Fox Run, we had to have an agreement with Gananoque for the ladder truck, but I understand that it's now covered up by the mutual aid agreement. So that's very good. And the other was the surface water runoff, which, I've seen in the very thorough presentation that we've had, that's been looked after as well. So other than that, I have no questions.
Are there any other questions? We do have the applicants here as well, but I'd like to take council's questions first before we hear from anyone else. Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. After reading all the material provided here, the thing that gets my attention is site plan control on a project this size. Do we have staff, or are we willing to direct staff to look after a project this large? My first thought would be to hire an outside party to act as site plan control. I'd like to hear the planning director's comments, please.
This is through Your Worship. I'm not certain of what your concerns are specifically around site plan control. However, to ensure that the site is developed as per the agreement, we would be taking site plan control securities. The Conservation Authority would also be issuing permits for development on the property. Prior to the release of any securities, we would require a letter from an engineer, a sealed letter indicating that everything on the site has been developed in accordance with the approved plans and drawings. So their engineer would be involved throughout the process. With respect to the site servicing and the other matters related to the servicing of the site and the stormwater, MOE would also be looking at that and issuing certificates, environmental certificates of approval for that. So I think that we have the resources necessary to look at this and make sure that the site is developed in accordance with site plan control. There will certainly be a very detailed site plan control agreement that goes along with this to implement all of the right recommendations out of the environmental reports, the noise reports, all of the traffic reports. Any of the reports that contained recommendations would go into the site plan control agreement and are reviewed and implemented through the drawings as well. So I'm confident that we have the resources we need to administer the agreement, but if we don't, I would certainly bring a recommendation forward to council that we retain any external help that we need.
Go ahead, follow.
Thank you, Your Worship. When you refer to securities, do you want to expand on that, or are you referring to something like a hold?
So through the site plan control guidelines that we have approved, as well as the site plan control bylaw that was brought to council last year, as part of a site plan control agreement, we require an engineering estimate for the construction of the works on site. So our site plan control bylaw requires that we take securities based on 50% of the total cost of paving, grading, and landscaping for the site development. So we would be taking a letter of credit or any other type of security that's provided and holding that until we're satisfied that the site is developed in accordance with the approved plans and drawings.
So in light of the vastness of this particular development, that would not be insignificant, that letter of credit or securities. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Holkey, and then I see Councillor Gorell on the screen.
It's not a question, it's an observation. When I read through it, I highlighted something I called risk, and it was about the other required approvals. I had many of the same concerns, but it seems to me you've covered them. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gorell, you're on deck.
I'd just like to thank, excuse me, my voice is a little raspy. I've got something. At any rate, I'd like to thank the planner for producing a pretty detailed report. And I think it's important for the public to understand, as well as council, the difference of what we're being asked tonight is zoning issues. The site plan control deals with how things get built and what it is that gets built. And there are numerous plans on the active application site of the township. The site plan control issue that Marnie just spoke to is very cogent. And that answers my issue, was that there are going to be engineering people looking into this, because I don't think we as a township have the resources to be zipping down there. The second area of concern, and it does again fall under site plan control, but Marnie put me in a better frame of mind on this, and it was dealing with the municipal responsibility agreement for the water and sewer, particularly the sewer, the new terrace system. In Lansdowne, we hire Owaka to be looking after our interests there. And I was curious who looks after this 40 condo outfit. And she tells me that it is the job of the developers to have reports made. So I'm good with that as long as our plan is. Two small things here. This has been referred to as seasonal over and over ad nauseum. And that has sat with me for 2 years. And I haven't seen anything written anywhere that deals with seasonal anything. But my concern is, does seasonal influence MPAC? Does seasonal impact our taxes on that for our current value assessment? And my last question would be, the parking is still unclear to me. I know there's been a lot of horse trading on the parking issue, but I would point out that it's really the developers' issue that they made. I mean, they're expanding their marina, so I don't have too much sympathy for their parking issues. But it says here tonight that we're looking at 226, and yet I was assured that we were looking at 245. It may seem insignificant, but everyone counts. So the seasonality issue, it may come down to something called new house warranty. I'm not sure, maybe the planner could, if it's important, flesh that out. If it's not important, I'm willing to let it go. The municipal agreements, I do want assurances that the township doesn't get hung out to dry on that. And the site plan control, I think the public needs to really wrap their head around what it is and how powerful it is. It gives this township extreme say in what goes on. In other words, do what you say what you do, and do what you say from a developer point of view. And I am feeling a little more comfortable with the engineering reports. So thank you very much for your time.
Go ahead, Ms. Venditti.
Thank you, through you. And if I miss anything, please let me know. So first of all, what is site plan control? Site plan control implements zoning. And so site plan control is required on this site because it's a commercial site, because it's a multi-residential proposal. What site plan control does is it ensures that everything is developed in accordance with the approved zoning that applies to a property. Site plan control looks at things like grading, drainage, servicing, landscaping, setbacks. It makes sure that everything on the site works and functions. So in looking at the site plan control agreement, we've looked at details to ensure that there's adequate fire access, that the roads are wide enough for the vehicles to get in and out, that two-way traffic can get in and out. We look at basically the whole layout of the site, where the garbage is going to be, how the garbage is going to be addressed. We look at noise issues, we look at lighting issues. There's a whole list of things that are looked at through site plan control. And then they're secured, as I said, to make sure that the site is built out as required. Some of the things that we can include in the agreement is that the roads in the area be kept clean through construction, that it's the developer's responsibility to clean those roads, to use dust suppression, those types of things. With respect to the municipal responsibility agreement for the servicing on the site, I was reviewing another agreement today to make sure that I was aware of everything that does go into the agreements. So there would be, and the agreement is also coming out of a Ministry of Environment approval of the services as well. So the Ministry of Environment requires this responsibility agreement to be in effect before they'll issue their approval for a system. What it requires is that the developer have their own consultant to operate and maintain the system. There is a mechanism within the municipal responsibility agreement to ensure that there's adequate costs and adequate reserves to built up in the event that a system should fail, so that there's money to do capital improvements as it goes along and maintain the system. So the municipal responsibility agreement is quite a detailed agreement. There's a lot that goes into it that's going to involve us working with the Ministry of Environment as well as the developer on this. And ultimately, the responsibility agreement has to come to council for approval before it's executed. So that's something that we haven't done a lot of detailed review on at a staff level at this point, but that will be coming forward at some point in the future. The other question was respect to seasonal housing. I also confirmed with the developer this afternoon that seasonal was thrown out in terms of a seasonal supply of housing, but the condo units or the units that are proposed to be built are going to be multi-residential units that have units in them that are built to a year-round standard. So someone can use them in the summer, someone can use them in the fall. These are not being built to the standard of a seasonal cottage type structure. They'll meet all of the requirements of building code for a year-round occupancy. So from a taxation perspective, it's not going to be a seasonal recreational unit. I can't speak specifically to how they'll be taxed, but the units will be year-round occupancy. Just with respect to parking, because there were a lot of different numbers thrown around for parking from the time the application was submitted until now. The recommendation in the bylaw that's being presented to council this evening is for 245 parking spaces to be located on site. The parking justification submitted with the application brought forward a justification, I believe it was for 236 spaces, but based on 245 being shown on the site plan drawing, that's the number that's included in the bylaw that's being recommended by staff. In addition, we've also had discussions with the applicant that should there be a parking concern on the site or need for overflow parking, that the applicant does own other properties in the area that could be used for overflow parking. And this discussion was brought forward because there were concerns because there isn't a large supply of public parking or an area for overflow parking. So that's something that we can also look at through site plan control and include some clauses that should parking become an issue, that this be considered and that there will be no overflow parking on the surrounding roads.
Fair enough.
And I think I've covered your questions, Councillor Grell, but if I've missed anything, please let me know.
He's got a follow-up. Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up, Marnie, on page of your report, the early page there, it does say in the parking, now this isn't the bylaw, this is just the preamble, but it says increase or decrease parking from 274 to 226. So I'm going to refer that's in air, where it's going to show up correctly at 245 is in the zoning amendment bylaw. Is that correct?
That's correct. That summary was from the original submission of the application. So through the review of the application, the request evolved to what's being presented in the bylaw.
Thank you.
Okay. Just as an aside as well, Ms. Venditti referred to it, but we have municipal agreements with other large facilities who have these new terrace systems in the municipality. This is not something new to us. It's just not something we deal with every single day. But having said that, the precedent has been set. The agreements are already sort of the templates there. And it's up to, and we've had good experience, I know, with one specifically that I'm aware of, with that landowner who's had nothing but success with that particular unit. And there's very specific amounts that have to be put into reserves for potential failure and fixing of that system, so that there is no further compromise to surrounding land. But just to give everybody a little bit of extra background on that. So go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through, I'd just like to echo Councillor Grell's comments to our Director of Planning. What you put forward to us as info packet was in depth. It was very well covered. It answered a lot of questions prior to tonight's meeting. I just want to comment that the investors in this project, I think, is the least of our concerns. They've illustrated the quality and their intent of how they build and the quality, as I mentioned, of what they do and have done already is already established. So that's the least of my concerns. The only other question I have is why the three readings all being combined tonight. Is that in lieu of expediting time to proceed with this project?
I don't think and that the amending bylaw be presented to council for all three readings. So that's what we usually do at the end of every council meeting is it's three readings and final passage. So it's just reiterating the verbiage in the council motion. That's all it is.
There wasn't any other intent then.
No. other
Okay,
intent.
thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jameson.
I've been having a challenge trying to frame this question. And it has nothing to do with the project. I really admire the work that our township staff has done on bringing this to fruition. So I congratulate them on that. My concern, and I actually think I sent an email on this, is our obligation with respect to the rest of the village. This is going to be a long period of construction. And you think in terms of the buildings all up and everybody's there and doing their thing. There's a long period of construction for a major project of this size. So my concern is not about the project, my concern is about what our obligation is and how we manage the road system so that particularly this little ribbon of a road down there in Rockport is not further compromised. Because we certainly do read about how residents already think it's compromised in many different ways. So, Your Worship, I'm just concerned that we as a township ensure that we have a traffic and safety plan in place that manages that period of time when construction is on and also identifies where that little ribbon of a road is off limits to construction activity, but also in the context of the other businesses running there, as well as residents, that somehow is organized in a way that doesn't turn front into a cement truck lane or whatever it happens to be. So that's my only concern. And I think this is a very exciting project and I look forward to watching it move along. Thank you.
So I'll ask Ms. Venditti to speak to it, but then this might be an opportunity for the developers to come forward and perhaps give their plans for management of the project and how it might happen.
So through you, we can look at some construction access and phasing through the site plan control agreement and put some requirements on around that. As I had mentioned, we can look at dirt being pulled out onto the road and the responsibility of the developer to keep the road clean, dust suppression, and we can look at what the traffic routes are and we can put some of that into place, as well as deal with if there are situations where something does need to come down around Front Road, we can look at notification and what's required to do some of that through the construction process. But obviously there needs to be a construction schedule determined prior to looking at some of that. So those are things that we can look at and work through in terms of public communication and work with the developer around where the construction access points are, those types of things.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from council before I ask the developers to add anything should they wish to? Okay, so the developers, do you have anything to add or are you happy with? Okay.
Thank you. I'm Mark Dalton, one of the owners of Huck's Marine and also the owner of VCL Construction that's done the work so far at the Park Store and the Marina. I think on the time frame on the roads and stuff. So our intention would be to do the development in two phases. First phase being the water condos and the second phase being the ones on closer to Front Street so that we have some land to basically do lay down on and work on to get the majority of the last bit of site work finished. And then our access would be to the east on Front Street to not go down and through the little village. And our main part of the plan has always been to start the heavy construction in the fall and finish the heavy construction before spring, before the Rockport is basically inundated with tourists and other companies and businesses. Not saying that they'll all be done in the 9-month phase, but the heavy construction of the structures, the exteriors, the roadways. And that is the same thing as we did with the initial buildings that we built. We started them all in the fall and had them all done in the spring as far as the heavy construction so that we didn't have Rockport filled with construction vehicles at the same time as buses, at the same time as tourists and everything like that. So that is one of the proposals, or that is our intention, is to build it out in 2 phases, 3 condos, then 2, and basically not impact the roads and the people any more than we need to, and out of season, so there's less people on the road as possible. Earlier on, there was talk about site plan and stuff, and we've actually been, because of the nature of this job, we've really worked on it for 3 years now, so that the zoning could suit the site plan. So the site plan process has been ongoing, and including the Ministry of Environment, Cataract Conservation Authority, Marnie and her team, and all of our consultants for over 3 years. Obviously got dragged out through COVID a bit longer than we thought it ever would be. But in that agreement, you know, there is also there is, on top of the securities to protect the landowners and the township, there is a road widening allowance that is being taken as part of the site plan agreement to give the town back more room to increase or have extra space on Front Street when it's done. I think there's a parkland fee allowance where we'll be paying a fee to the township to use that money to do landscaping and other parkland requirements on the project. So we've been through, and with the township, obviously, you know, parking experts, traffic experts, sound experts, and feel like we have really exhausted everything to make sure that the development fits in to the village and just helps bring people to the village and build a new level of standard and quality for the township. And on top of that, of course, the taxpayers and the taxpaying money that will be added to the township.
Any questions for the developer while he's at the podium? I thank you very much for your information, and I will ask for any questions from the gallery before I call the question.
I'll say one more thing.
Sure, that's okay.
As part of the development too, and maybe some of the locals don't know, but we will be adding a dry fire hydrant into the development with an access for the fire department to use that. And I think it's 11 kilometers or something that a dry hydrant is able to be used. So our hydrant will actually be accessible to the fire department to service basically the entire village of Rockport, as well as our facility up the road, Park Store. But so I just wanted to throw that in there as well. And that we've also offered our boat ramp facilities and stuff like that to the township, as they've already used for emergency situations.
Thank you. Any questions from the gallery in regards to the development? Please come forward, state your names for the record for the minutes.
I'm Donna Johnston from Rockport. And actually, I keep hearing Front Street. We're on Birches Lane, and it's the main street cloaked right across from the marina. And that's where most of the traffic is that's coming to the marina is Birches Lane. And they were mentioning about widening, how there's no widening of the road or something to make access better on Front Street. But on Birches Lane, there isn't any space to make any more room. And the parking is a big issue in Rockport. There isn't any parking now. People are having a problem because a lot of the marinas are overloaded, you know, with access. Visitors are coming, so they're coming out and parking on the street. So anyway, it was just a confusion about Birches Lane
Versus
and Front Street. Yeah.
Okay. So based on the comment regarding the widening of the road, maybe Marnie, you can address that a little bit more in detail to explain to the members of the gallery how that change, how that will be changed as per the site plan agreement. Marnie's just trying to find the agreement for those who are on Zoom that can't see her.
So through site plan control, one of the considerations that we look at is the existing road network. I'm just going to share my screen to show you what we're talking about. So under the Planning Act, we can take road widenings for the municipality through site plan control. And that's what's proposed here. So the official plan establishes a distance from the center line of the road that a road allowance is supposed to be. So when we say road widening, it isn't actually asphalt surface or an improvement, but what it allows us to do is build our road network to make sure that we have right of ways that are up to standard as development occurs, because that's the only time we can actually take it. So I know it's very small here, but this area right here is it's a sliver of land. It's a wedge of land from the frontage of the property that will be conveyed to the township through the site plan control process that allows us to actually build our road allowance to a wider. So here is the edge of the asphalt right now as it exists. And this little V is the area of the road widening. That land will be conveyed to the township just to add to the road allowance, so that if there are improvements in the future that are taking place to the road, that it can be improved and that we have that land in our ownership.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Are there any other questions or comments before I call the question? I see a hand up. Come on forward, please.
Margot Miller from Rockport. Just to Councillor Jameson, I'm glad that you questioned that about the traffic. I just want people to note that for your first stage, Tackaberry trucks were coming down the western Front Street, what is actually Front Street, through the western gates to go to the development. And when I asked the guy why he's coming, or numerous trucks coming down, why are they going the long way through? Why aren't they coming down Burgess Lane directly in? Oh, we didn't know there was that access, they replied. Some of them, not all of them. So just to make that clear, it was already happening. But it sounds like that's been taken in hand now, and there will be some, I hope, direction to the people bringing in all the construction material. But I do have other comments. Is this the time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm not against development completely, but there's good and bad development. I've been a resident of Rockport off and on for probably 35 years. I've worked very hard in trying to hold on to the heritage aspect of Rockport. I have a house that was built in 1868. Many, many people come and photograph the houses on the west side because they're still intact. Over the years, the township has allowed at least 7 houses, displacing what I think is 12 families or residents, to be rezoned or torn down the houses and turned into commercial development. So we really have a very little residential base anymore to fight development. Anyhow, back to this. I don't think it was Scott. I think Peter Johnson said, more residents should help Rockport with some of the issues we have with over tourism. Of course, the pandemic sort of dealt with that at this point. But it's true, to some extent, more residents, I think, would be really good in Rockport. But there's good and bad development. And 5 buildings, if all the councillors, I'm sure you've been down there to see 5 units go up on that property, it just seems like too much on that small of a scale of property. It's I don't know. It's not. The other thing is, if the architecture was the vernacular of the town and to keep it historic, you might have noted there's no stone and steel buildings that exist in Rockport. And I don't want to be completely negative because I do bring my boat there. I do really appreciate a good mechanic. I've bought boats there. I bought engines there. That aspect is good. Resident will be good. But I guess in one way, I just have, all your ducks are in a row, it sounds like. I just want to appeal to you to think of the impact it might have on the village as a historical village. We'll have to get rid of that historic Rockport or a historic village. I mean, it's hardly, there's going to be about 4 or 5 houses left only that are historic houses. So anyhow, so I can only appeal to your aesthetics, your ethic, and your sense of community, and thinking about maybe scaling down something and making it, rather than plop, 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 something that's integrated. In the south coast of England, they're taking down condos that are only 10 years old to restore to heritage villages what they look like. I mean, are we going to look at that in 10 or 12 years? What's happened to Rockport? Some of the questions I did want to ask specifically is, what percentage, have you got any bylaws for the condo? What percentage would be owner occupied?
I can answer your questions when you're done.
Okay. And the other is, will there be any restrictions on renting it for Airbnb, short-term rentals? What would be the policy on that? I guess that's about it. I mean, the architecture and just the volume of and size of the buildings there are my concern. I would love to see it developed in a certain way. I think it would be an addition to Rockport. And we do know what happened with the pandemic, that it became a very quiet town. In some ways it was good. In other ways, I felt badly for tourism and what was going on. So the residential increase, I think that way would be good, as I've said before. But anyhow, I hope that the council thinks about this, and the developers, like, what do you legacy want to be left with? That we've ruined the village of Rockport, or we've made it more of a historic village and encouraged and increased the good quality of living in that village? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Go ahead, Ms. Venditti.
Thank you. So with respect to what percentage would be owner occupied, that's not something that we can regulate through planning. That's people zoning. And from a human rights perspective, we can't regulate owner occupation of residential units. With respect to restrictions on rentals or short-term rentals, we're currently doing public consultation with respect to that and do not have a framework to regulate that. The only other thing I would add is that if in fact these do become condominium units, that there may be some articles within the condominium incorporation that speaks to the ability for owners of condominium units to rent out or lease out their units, but that's not something I can provide an answer to at this point in time.
Okay. I'll ask if the developers have anything answers to that, or any comments to make. Okay, that's fine. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the conversation, I had a couple of questions come up. One is parking that's on site now, opposed to the development of 245. Being an active marina as it is with many boat slips, I would imagine the parking is not going to be too much different. Secondly, with the access to the actual property and for the construction, are the driveways and roadways going to be one of the first things improved so that you actually do have the flow? Because you talked about a second driveway being put in for the second part of the development to ensure that traffic flow and construction laydown and the heavy trucks that are going to be passing through there have adequate room to swing around and not go down by Front Street. Thank you.
Ms. Venditti.
So with respect to parking, there's 2 different parking requirements in the zoning bylaw, one for a marina that includes the floor area of the buildings associated with the marina, as well as parking requirements for slips. With respect to the condominium units, there's a parking requirement of 1.5 parking spaces per unit. So the applicant, through the application that's in, or the proposed zoning amendment, is meeting the parking requirement for the residential units. The reduction that's proposed is based on the marina requirement. So it's a reduction in the number of spaces associated with the marina. The parking justification that was provided looked at the actual use of the marina and came up with a reduction based on there being efficiencies between the residential parking and owners of the units having boat slips, as well as efficiencies within the space of the marina use, given that people using the marina, as well as people that live in the condos having access to the laundry facilities, the gym facilities, the additional floor areas of amenity spaces that would generate a parking requirement based on the way the zoning bylaw is, and the fact that the people using those facilities would already be users of the marina or condo owners, rather than oversupplying parking on the site, we recommended the parking reduction. With respect to the construction and staging areas on site and laydowns, and we can look at that through the site plan control process, and we can look at putting some construction staging requirements into the agreement to ensure that there is as little offsite disturbance as possible.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Foti?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I just wanted to comment on Ms. Miller's comments about the historical aspect. I traveled through the village twice here in the last few weeks with that in mind. And I think we can go anywhere, most anywhere, down again in Gananoque, Lower Town, City Center, Brockville, Quebec City, up on the hill. I don't think he'll ever take away from the historic value of a historic area, regardless of how big or small the village or town or city may be. I don't think he'll ever take away from the historic aspect of the buildings in Rockport that fall under those historic designations. At the same point, as I mentioned earlier, we got developers that are at the top of their game, willing to invest millions of dollars in the village of Rockport. They could have taken that money to Port Hope, to Cornwall, places that have councils even paying to pay their accommodation to come and look. I think when all said and done, the village of Rockport will be the big winner when this is finished. Excuse me, when this is finished, because of the quality they're going to build and the fact that we'll have residents there all the time, or at least seasonal. And they're going to be in a place where there previously was limited residential accommodation before. Thank you.
Okay, I had a hand up in the back. So I'll recognize Mr. Dalton to come forward and speak about the parking, and then I'll go to Ms. Merkley. And then we'll try, and then I have a hand up on the screen, Martin Borton, and then I think I'll call the question after that.
It was just on the parking because we continually talk about the reduction on parking, but in actual fact, we're going to be increasing parking from what we have. And I almost wanted to take some videotapes and stuff of our parking lot this summer and last summer through long weekends. The way the parking sort of works is, a spot for every marina slip, I think right now. There is never a case in reality that every single person in a marina is there every weekend. There has never been a case that we've had parking. We employ staff throughout the entire weekend. We have never had parking on the roadway, and we always have had excess parking spots on our site throughout. I've been involved, I think, as an owner since 2016 or 17, and we manage our parking now by lots when our staff have, our customers all have parking passes in their windows. And we've been managing and keeping track of those parking passes. They all have numbers on them. And parking is just not an issue that we have at all. And through the condo development of the 3 on the water, the rest of the parking lots get built. So all the parking lots that we need aren't even built yet. And we also believe that even though we have taken care of the condo parking, that many of those condo owners will be boat owners. So you're just doubling up again. So I just wanted to help add to the point that although on paper, we're asking for this reduction in parking, we're actually increasing from what we already have, and believe that marina users and condo users are going to be almost one and the same. And we're increasing the amount of parking that we actually have.
Thank you. Ms. Merkley, did you want to come forward and ask questions?
Wendy Merkley. I think you all know me anyway. The parking is the one thing that I wanted to clarify about Rockport. Is it correct, my understanding, that the south side of Front Street all the way through Rockport is zoned no parking? And Hucks have done a great job. They are not part of the overflow onto the road at this time. But Rockport parking is getting to be a challenge, and it has been for quite a while. It always will be. And the only concern I have is that it doesn't then flow over with, when I read reduction in parking and adding of slips, is that we start parking on the road that way. We are already too many people parking on the road, and we haven't had the township label it accordingly. We could, the township could come by and label no parking all the way through. And as a village, part of the village group, we didn't want that. We want people to be able to stop for short term. But once you start getting people trying to park on that narrow road and it fills up, then we're going to have a problem. So the parking is a concern when you see reduction. I was reassured that you don't think that's going to be a problem. And I would hate to see us have to label the road and put signs up, no parking. But it's this weekend alone, several islanders came to me for extra parking in our parking lot. And you're right, not everybody's here all at the same time, thank goodness. And we had islanders who wanted 5 spots for the weekend. When people own waterfront and that they get visitors on the long weekend and everybody comes. So the parking on the road is the biggest concern I have, because that will hurt and it'll destroy the aesthetics. But I commend the development, because we have people live on their boats now and they all come and shop in the village and contribute to the village. So I think the plans look good, and I think it will add to Rockport and it will blend. But I do worry about our narrow road and the parking. So that's my only concern, is that we really, and we've been working on the idea of a parking lot to get boats and trailers out of the village. But I can honestly say none of the parking challenges can be attributed to the Huck Marina. They seem to handle it. I just worry that as we add 40 condos and I've forgotten how many boat slips, that people will start sliding up and parking on the road. So that's my only concern.
Thank you. Okay, we have a hand up on the screen, Martin Bort. And we're just going to allow him. So Mr. Bort, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you. And thanks for the thorough job and professional job it looks like everyone has done, both in terms of the developers and the township staff on this. And throughout the meeting, I think most of the councillors asked the questions that I had heard from residents and addressed them. So I just wanted to mention a few things. With respect to the development, the official plan references keeping in character with the village, the locale. I think that's a matter of opinion, and I think some of the residents have expressed that the character is not being maintained. But I think that's also subjective. And thanks to Councillor Gurrell for addressing the seasonal use. That was a question that had gone not really answered clearly until this evening, I believe, when Ms. Venditti clarified that there would be no implications with respect to the use of the seasonal term. And oh, sorry, first thing I forgot is Jack and Elizabeth Sturkin sent their regrets. They were intending to attend tonight, but weren't able to due to low water levels. One of their concerns was the seasonality, and they had raised that several times and not felt they gotten a satisfactory answer. So I will relay back to them what that means. With respect to Councillor Jameson's comments, thank you. Once again, Councillor Jameson shows concern. I think his words were obligation with respect to the rest of the village and the long period of construction. As he no doubt remembers a lot of my communication with him during some construction in my neighborhood, that when I was woken up by a dozen transport trucks at 3 a.m. and jackhammers at 5 a.m. And the township did not have resources in place to address that when it was taking place, and the site plan control was not maintained. Deposit in that case was returned before site landscaping was done by accident, I understand. But it does sound like Ms. Venditti was saying that the procedures had been modified with respect to site plan control, and that an engineer, a certified individual, would be required. So I just wanted to get clarification on, has the site plan control changed in the last several years? I'm not aware. I assume it has been. And it sounds like the site plan controls that she was describing would be adequate. Again, with respect to the construction period, as Margot Miller mentioned, there are trucks going down the wrong side of the road and saying, we don't know about this. And again, I experienced that for years of my life, and transports coming down the highway when they weren't supposed to, and then finding it incredibly difficult to get through to anyone at the township or at the Parks Commission to say, hey, this shouldn't be taking place. So I guess that's my one question to Ms. Ngidi. And I just wanted to say, generally, it looks like everything has been done first class with the project with respect to the engineering studies, et cetera. And if it's a given that the township is going to allow setbacks that are different than what is proposed in the official plan, and also height restrictions that are not consistent with the official plan, I would just ask and appeal to council to consider future projects and to consider the cumulative effect of such, and how we are losing some heritage on our waterway. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'll just ask that one question be directed to Ms. Venditti about the site plan control, and if she could explain to me briefly what that process is, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Venditti?
Thank you, through you. So in, I believe it was December 2021, we brought forward a new site plan control bylaw together with guidelines associated with that was presented to council. The previous site plan control bylaw didn't contain any provisions with respect to performance security. So there was no mechanism for staff to take securities to ensure that a site was developed in accordance with the site plan control drawings and agreement that were approved. So that's a new process that we have in place that wasn't previously in effect in the township. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Actually, I'll ask you to stay at the podium. There's one comment made, Ms. Sturkin, who's written it in, and it says, what is the point of having bylaws and an official plan when it can all be waived when an off-site industry wants to turn Rockport into a profit center? I don't really know. I guess it's more of a comment than a question. But the question, I guess, is why do we have the ability to change bylaws and official plans, or what that process is and why it's important?
So through you, an official plan is a higher level policy document. An official plan identifies things in a general level and says what's permitted in areas in terms of speaking to land use. Rockport is designated as a settlement area in the official plan. The tourist commercial designation that applies to this property allows for multi-residential development in association with existing tourist commercial uses or tourist commercial uses. So the property is developed as a marina, which is permitted in the tourist commercial designation that applies to it in the official plan. And the tourist commercial designation allows for multi-residential development. The Planning Act allows for a zoning bylaw to be amended. So the zoning bylaw establishes the setbacks, the permitted uses, how things are laid out on a property. A zoning bylaw amendment has to comply with the official plan. The application being presented to council tonight is a zoning bylaw amendment. There are no official plan amendments requested with this application. This is a zoning bylaw amendment to allow multi-residential development on the property that complies with the official plan. The other performance standards that are being requested to be amended relate to parking, building setbacks. And there's provisions in the Planning Act to amend a zoning bylaw. There's provisions in the official plan to amend a zoning bylaw, because not all sites are cookie cutter and can meet all of the requirements that are established. So the recommendation being presented to council tonight is based on a significant amount of technical study that's been provided to staff by the applicant. Staff have looked at this proposal to ensure that it meets the requirements of the official plan. The Conservation Authority have reviewed this to ensure that it meets all of the natural hazards and that there are no natural hazards being created, and that the official plan policies and the provincial policy statement have been addressed. So there's always mechanisms to amend a zoning bylaw. There's mechanisms to amend official plans because things change. Things evolve, land uses evolve, and uses evolve on properties. So what's being presented to council tonight based on staff's recommendation meets the policies of the official plan and is compliant with the official plan and the provincial policy statement.
Thank you. Okay, so we've spent a significant amount of time on this, which I think was well warranted based on the large nature of this particular development and the fact that it's something that we don't see in this municipality very often. So at this point, I'm going to call the question and call the vote and then go from there. So I'm going to read the motion again, just for clarification. It is technical, so I apologize. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Olkey, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that council that one, the application for a zoning bylaw amendment file number Z-2019-005 submitted by Huck's Marina for the property municipally known as 51, 53, and 55 Front Street be approved, and that two, bylaw number 07-079 zoning bylaw of the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands as amended be further amended as per Exhibit 1, draft bylaw and Schedules A and B to amend zoning bylaw number 07-079 to report number SR-118-22, and that the amending bylaw be presented to council for all three readings. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, and we're carried. So the zoning bylaw is going forward to be amended, and we thank the owners of Huck's Marina and the developers for the extensive work done. And we look forward to working with you to see this project through. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to gauge council. Does anybody need a break now? Would you like a break now? We'll take a break now, and then we'll get into the rest of the pieces of the agenda. So we'll come back at 7:45. Does that give everybody enough time? Thank you.